Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started in a couple minutes as more people join. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anna Munns with OHUG, and I would like to welcome Cloud Connectors today presenting to you all. And before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that all attendees are on mute. And then if you do have questions, to enter them in the question box on your webinar toolbar. And there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And then following the webinar, you'll be allowed to evaluate today's session through the webinar tool. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. And then this presentation will also be recorded and available for download on the OHUG website. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our first presenter, Pierre.
Thank you very much, Anna. My name is Pierre, and I am joined today by Jeff, our CTO. We are the Cloud Connectors. I want to first welcome everyone. We have over 250 people from 200 companies in 13 countries that have registered to our webinar. Some of you are business analysts, managers, HR consultants, IT specialists, directors of HR, and VP namely. In today's webinar, we present recipes for successful Oracle HCM and Taleo integrations. Recipes based on our client implementations. We will demo a new hire integration from Taleo into HCM using our integration platform to illustrate more recipes. We'll now briefly introduce ourselves, starting with Jeff. Jeff, please.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Tremblay. I'm a CTO of the Cloud Connectors. I've been in the integration space for about 17 years. I've spent 12 years with the Oracle Taleo Cloud. I'm basically an expert in SaaS integration. I was previously product manager for Taleo Connect within the Oracle family, Taleo family. So welcome, everybody. Glad to be with you today. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm Pierre Laurin, VP Customer Success. I have 20 years of experience in integrations, including 17 years at Oracle Taleo. I've delivered over 150 integrations projects and worked with over 100 Oracle clients. Customer delight is my ultimate goal. In today's webinar, we'll briefly present who we are at the Cloud Connectors, discuss challenges when implementing a new hire integration from Taleo into Oracle HCM, share lessons with our clients' implementations, present a high-level architecture diagram for this integration, share recipes for global implementation, gender, ethnicity, address validation, and then present more recipes with our demo. Finally, we'll answer your questions in the chat window with pleasure. About the Cloud Connectors, we are experts in integrations, have implemented thousands of integrations, hundreds of projects and worked with most of the Fortune 100. We've developed integrations to companies of all sizes, actually, all industries all over the world. Our clients are super satisfied. We deliver pre-built, pre-tested connectors, which are installed in the cloud or on-premise. Our solutions result in lower total cost of ownership and faster implementation for your organization. Our hosted integrations require no server, no software on your infrastructure. We do integrations, migrations with Oracle HCM, PeopleSoft, TBS, Taleo, Workday, iCIMS, ADP, Smashline, Ultipro, assessment vendors, and much more. We are your business partner and work with you to implement solutions for your organization's success. Let's now talk about new hire integration from Oracle HCM into Taleo. Organizations can constantly want to improve efficiency of the new hire process and reduce HR costs. So how can we help? Well, automating the HR process from Taleo into Oracle HCM to create pending workers, employees, with an integration will contribute significantly. Such integration eliminates manual entries and is a big win for new hires joining your organization. But still, there are data challenges. For instance, global implementation with data fields such as gender, ethnicity that have country-specific values. Address validation in Oracle HCM with Vertex. Handling use cases such as new hires, rehires, transfers, promotions, global transfers. Implementing one or two new hire integrations from recruiting or from onboarding. And finally, developing integration using HDL and TC is quite complex, actually. So one of the great ways to create recipes, which is the topic of today's session, is to successfully look at our successful integrations and to reflect and act on lessons learned from projects and feedback from our clients. Based on integrations projects that we did with Wang Fang, American Eagle, RTI, Creighton University, and much more, we're sharing lessons today, which we also shared in a lot more details in our live session held at OHAG on June the 12th in Las Vegas. So here they are. Do not underestimate impact of multiple countries. Think of HCM fields that have country-specific values as an example. Communication between functional and technical is key. The integration design is dependent on client decisions and functional design. Implementing a one or a two-step process, meaning it is essential to understand the business process and needs. Estimating realistic level of effort and project duration. In other words, please plan sufficient client resources for the testing phases. Client management training, yep. Implementing a new hire integration requires standard operating procedures to be updated and shared with your HR team, definitely. And also about integration design, testing. Invest sufficient time to test and design the integrations. This is too often underestimated. And this is where we come up with recipes. So let's take a look at a simplified diagram that represents a new hire integration from Taleo into HCM. Recruiters and hiring managers use Taleo to hire job seekers and to hire employees on new positions for use cases such as transfers and promotions. The integration exports the data from Taleo to create and update new hires in HCM as pending workers or employees, depending on client requirements. The new hires and employees then log into Oracle HCM to update data as needed. Ultimately, the new hires and employees experience is awesome because they can work efficiently on day one of their new job. Regarding the global implementations and design of the new hire integrations, one of the first questions to ask is, which data fields must be part of the integrations for the new hire to contribute on day one, and what are the business requirements for this new hire to be set up in HCM on day one? Many fields are country-specific in HCM. Gender, ethnicity are some of them. And also, things to consider is that data can be entered as self-service in HCM, for instance, emergency contact. So answers to this question is essential input in the design of the integration coming from recruiting and or onboarding. So next question is, pending worker or employees? Well, as you may know, the out-of-the-box integration creates pending worker, whereas clients typically want employees. So we do recommend creating employees. Other questions, source of truth. Which system generates the employee number? Is it ADS? Is it HCM? That depends on client needs and timing as to when and where the employee number is created. So the recipe is to have these topics discussed with the client and the functional and integration resources, and to document a rock-solid integration design and a Taleo data map before going into the development. Regarding gender field, take a look at this table. These are values available in Oracle HCM. Gender is a country-specific field in HCM with different values. So let's take this use case as an example. Your organization hires US, India, and Netherlands residents. So we typically create 3 user-defined fields in Taleo with country-specific values as shown on screen. Now this is a good new hire experience as the person only sees the appropriate values in Taleo. So the recipe here is to create 3 UDFs in Taleo with the same codes and descriptions that exist in HCM. Some clients prefer to have an alternative solution to this and have gender configured in Taleo with only the common values in HCM. And this recipe also applies to many other fields, such as ethnicity, marital status, EEO, emergency contact, relationship. And I will now pass it over briefly to Jeff for the next slide. So Jeff, please.
Sure. So this one is just to represent. So using the Taleo Connect client, when you do an extract, we just put a brief excerpt of code, which basically, by using a very simple decode, we can still extract the field as one field, which is called sex, and this one in the alias. And then basically it just says, you know, look, the first thing it says, look at the USA gender code, bring that if there's a value. If it's null, it says then do another decode, you know, and then go check the Netherlands one. If Netherlands is null, then go pick India. Otherwise, basically, in this case, with one simple extract, we can take the 3 fields and still put it into one. So unfortunately, it doesn't, you know, it does require to add or change the code as you add countries, but it still allows you to do, you know, the sex as to 1. So again, the point out what Pierre says there, the key here is to make sure that your functional team will implement properly the field and then tell them, you know, that the codes will be the same across all the UDFs. But with this, at least you can still have one interface that works globally. Back to you, Pierre.
Thank you, Jeff. And now about address validation. Oracle HCM offers a feature to validate the new hire address using Vertex for residents in the USA and Canada. This feature is important, as when activated, the information entered in the address fields must be valid and coherent. For example, a new hire cannot enter in HCM values such as my country in the United States, and my state is New York, and my county is Orange. Well, nope, HCM will not accept this because Orange County is actually in California. So in Taleo, the challenge is that there is no such feature for the new hires to enter a valid combination of address fields for the place of residence. So the recipe is to create the employee in HCM as a 2-step process. First step is to create the worker without the address fields. The second step is to import the address. Why? Well, this allows the employee to be created in HCM even though the new hire address that was entered in Taleo has an invalid combination of data. This also reduces the number of data-related errors, and such errors can actually be resolved with an onboarding form to override invalid values. So if Vertex is enabled in HCM. The recipe is to create a candidate UDF address, that is, defined as a large user-defined selection, a LUDs, in Taleo. And then we do what? We import the Vertex values in Taleo using a LUDs integration. Now this is a great new hire experience, as selecting the address can be done using the zip code, and the combination of the address fields is therefore valid. On screen, you have an example here of LUDs for a US address separated by pipe delimiters for US. So implementing country-specific processes also help creating a great new hire experience. And now we're ready to go to Jeff for a demo. So Jeff, I'll make you presenter, and we'll be going into the demo of our platform. Now to you, Jeff, please.
Okay, are you seeing my screen? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. All right, thanks, Pierre. Okay, so now I will, as Pierre said, I'll log into an instance of our one of our tool, which is, we call it Connect Everywhere. So I'm gonna call to our production demo zone. So let me log in right now. Okay, so by the way, you get this question a lot. So we do support, let me see if I can minimize this here. I just put it on the side. All right, excellent. So we support two-factor authentication. Right now it's just not enabled, but if I go my setting, I could just enable it, scan the, the barcode, and then use, your iPhone authenticator to do it. Since this is a demo, we typically don't do it. But now I'm logged into one instance. So the first thing, once you log into Connect Everywhere, that you see is your dashboard, which is a real-time feed of what is going on ultimately on the server. So first, at the top, you have notification. I have none right now, but if we want, this is what we use to push you information. Let's say, we've upgraded your instance to the new version, or if there's changes, so we'll push information, and we'll also prompt alarms if there's anything you need to be notified on as you log on. And then you get a real-time feed of your, disk usage, memory usage, CPU. So we show like the last 3 hours of what's going on, and it's real time. So meaning if right now would be running things, we should see my CPU spiked and so on. And then at the bottom, we'll show workflow execution, everything that has ran for the last 7 days. So you can get an idea of basically your workload spread. How are you spreading your integration across the server, if you're scheduling, or if it's anything real time? Basically, you'll see how the server is working during a weekday. All right, then the second panel is what we call workflows, or see workflows as integration, and I'll dig into it a little further, and then I'll just browse very quickly to the rest. So the configuration is, this is where you put, as it specify, the configuration. So like the top parts will be your secrets, which will store that in a vault, but this is where you're gonna put like things like, I have my connectivity information for Taleo Connect. I'll just say, I'll drag my configuration board for TCC if I have a custom dictionary. So this is the Taleo Connect client for Taleo Enterprise information. So this is where you'll just store your information, and then we do run Taleo Connect client on our platform. If you have REST, you're connecting to external REST server, you'll just put your REST information here. Secure file server, anything basically. So all this information will be stored here. We do have lookups. And so lookups is, if you have values from one system to the other that you need to transform, you can do that on our platform. The nice thing we have about lookups as well is, we can actually give, so we have the users, and you can create a user and give him permissions to own that. So it allows a nice separation of duty between IT and business. So business owner will typically owns data, versus IT will own the process. But if let's say you're using a on-prem Taleo, you're using Taleo Connect client or anything like that, then you lose that clear definition, because IT becomes the owner. If it breaks, they'll be notified, and then they need to reach out to business to get the new mapping. With this, we can do online. You can create a user and say you're the owner of this. We can notify them if it breaks and we're missing value, and then they can automatically manage it. And then we have, I'll walk you through that as I walk you through the the actual workflow, but we have data types which are more strict, like if you want to identify what's valid or not for records, and then data mapping, data map, and then we have our own net change engine as well. So in the config, this is what you'll put in. Basically with this, it just allows us to, if you move from staging to prod, you just, you create your workflow, you have your configuration. Once you're done, you can export, and we can import to another server with different configuration for production. Typically, that's how it works. Then the rest really quickly. Of course, you have your schedule. You just schedule your jobs. You can anything that will run. You have your logs. You can interrogate anything that ran on the server. You pick your workflow, time range, and of course, you can or search directly to the logs. You have your users that you create, again, that you can set the permissions, and then you can have a view of the files. Anything, you can browse and download files and see anything that's happening on your server. So and that's for any temporary files that will be stored by the integration as they run. Now that's the 2-minute workflow, just so you understand the environment very quickly. Now let me bring the actual workflow we want to demo today. Well, let me zoom in into this a little bit. So by default, it just loads the workflow and do a full page. So I'll zoom in a little bit. Pierre, how's that look on your side? Is that fairly decent for the size?
Yep, super.
Yes. Okay, excellent. So before I dig into the meat of the actual integration, so very quickly, kind of the screen, how things are working. So on the left here, we have what we call nods, which see this, there's those little box. So this is where you'll pick up the nods. So let's say I would like to, add a new file to this and run. I could just, create, just run and say, oh, this output, and change, delete this one, or do whatever I want. So you just create your workflow as you go automatically. So on the left, you pick all the pre-built connectors, any pre-built tool that you want to use. You ties things together. And on the right, so if I double click, let's say this TCC, it'll bring me, this is the information. So contextualized information about the selected node that you have. So you see the information will switch. So it'll just show you basically, this is how you configure each of them. And then I'll show you when you execute, but you can see, if there's any, when you actually run, so more in a development mode, you'll have your debug panel, your payload information. I'll show you when I actually execute. And then you can get a log of what you're running as well, just to view the output to prepare for your prod. Okay, so let's dig into the actual workflow. So just to tie back to what Pierre presented, the architecture diagram, I've put some notes on the 2 main nodes. So see the 2 steps. So this first step here is extract Taleo rehires. So basically, which will say this is the TCC export that will connect to the Taleo zone and then just automatically extract the record. So this is the 2 main one, and the second one will be the fusion. So worker, so send file to HDL. So those 2 are kind of the main one. Extract data, in between, transform, send to fusion to HDL, and then if we very quickly, then it's download the BI reports, then we do transformation of those errors. I'm invoking in their sub workflow. So in this one, you see there's I'm invoking another workflow which is to handle HDL error. I'll walk you through it very quickly, and then we're parsing those errors and then sending for each recruiters, if whatever records they need to be aware if there's any issue, we'll send them an email. So I'll do a dig into that. And then to tie back again to what Pierre presented, this one represents a real use case where first we send the worker information and we do a second pass, which in this one will actually send address information. All right, and then we send. And in this case, I'm not downloading the errors because we're just for simplicity purpose, we're only tracking the first one. And this could actually represent a real use case where you say, you know what, send the error best depending on, are you doing recruiting? Have you done the LODs? Like, are you sure you're going to have low errors? Or it could just be that if they fail, employees self-manage and fusion themselves. So you just try your best and then don't notify. But we could accommodate, put an error in there and actually send to the candidate to them to fix in the source system. All right, so let's take a first look again. So this is the TCC one. So if I look again, I have a first piece. This is where I'm tying to the config that I show you where I've put the configuration board. So the configuration, so I'm just attaching this node to say, okay, connectivity, connect to this one. And then this piece will be the actual TCC file. So you don't create your TCC on our platform. We didn't recreate Taleo Connect client, but you'll create them using Taleo Connect client and then just drag and drop the file here. So you can go and pick up the files that you have, attach them here, or delete or drag and drop, whatever it feels best. And if we take a look at this file, let me just download and open. You'll see this is very straightforward TCC. So this is a new hire for application under the transition module, and then you have all the projections. But this is one. The point we're trying to make here, this is one extract. We're just extracting every single field into one shot from TCC. Everything that is needed will get extracted. This will generate a file that will, in this one, that will just generate a file, a worker file on the hard drive. Then I'm going to read that file, the CSV read, and then transform the file automatically. So as soon as we're going to apply. So in this one, and I'll show you in this one, when I read the file, first I'm applying a first data map. So I'll show you the data map. I'm saying, okay, do a phone, apply a structure for the phone. So, and I'll show you, let's go take a look at that data, that first data map in there. So the first phone data map in this one. So our data maps allows you, ultimately, is you pre-configure the system to say, from one system, and we can do 2 steps data map. So we could do temporary in the middle, like an HR JSON structure to say, if you want to say, this is Taleo, transform to HR JSON, then transform to Fusion. This can allow you to more easily, if you have one system and you talk to multiple systems, like you could be talking to Oracle and Workday, and still extracting everything from Taleo, then you could define a data map that says one will be, here's my Taleo to middle, and then Taleo to Workday, and then Taleo to Oracle. In this case, I'm just doing one simple structure. So in Taleo, there's a phone is one field. So I have home phone, and then I have work phone and mobile phone. They're one field. In Fusion, it's actually a structure. So it's you see it's a 3-record structure linked to one record. So with this first data map, I'm just saying create my phone structure and go take my effective start date that I extracted one, and then so create all the necessary field for Fusion to handle and create that proper structure. All right. Then the if we go back here, the second transformation, then in this one I'm applying a second data map, which is my HCM worker data, again linked on person number. So if I go back to config and take a quick look at this data map, which will be this one. So in this one I'm applying, and this is my final output. So it's on the right, but ultimately I'm creating my worker structure here. I'm saying, okay, create this this worker, person email, legislative data, person name. Should have probably turned off the Outlook notification. Apology for all the pop-ups, but I want to show you later the actual emails. But anyway, I'll let that for now. Okay, so in here you see that I create all the proper mapping of what is needed. So one record, and this is the representation for HDL into Fusion of one record, one worker. So you see that everything is separated. I need to say, this is my worker, this is the email, so everything is a structure. Legislative data, and you have all this mapping. So everything is pre-mapped. Then in my workflow, I just apply the data maps, and it automatically will create the structure. So let me run this very quickly. Oops, to run. Oh, and I forgot to put the stop to it. Never mind. It's not gonna, it'll run. Actually, let me save and restart because we're not. All right. And now it's running twice. It needs to run. All right, never mind. It's gonna run. No, it's not. It should rerun and show me my workload. All right. I'm probably going to receive a couple of emails, but it's no biggie. So you see in this one, so when I look at my payload here, what it is showing me, I stopped it here. So the input is what's going to be in my payload at this point that I'm showing on the screen. So before it enters this step, and then the output is when it reaches the outer step here. So if I look at this import, there's 3 steps. So this one will produce a CSV, it creates a CSV structure. So if I look at here, what I got out of Taleo, 2 records, 66 field in each of them, and then if I look quickly, you'll see that like information about you get everything. And then if I look at the phone, I have like my own phone area code. So where When we extract out of Taleo, we just use a simple regex formula to say extract me my area code and then grab the rest as the actual phone information and so on. So it's pre-extracted, but all the information is there, and then the simplified structure. So after the second phase, which is my CSV, and I've applied the first data map, what results is this standard output that I put. So I'm saying take my input, created a standard structure, which if I look at it would be the same information, but I just said here's now I actually have a phone structure that is ready to be sent to HDL in this one. So this is the data structure that HDL will require for each of them. So each of the phones that is to be inputted. And then after this second transformation, which is the results, I'll actually have a result structure. That is, this is what HDL will require for the full thing. And right now you're just seeing the previous transaction that is completed. So, but it's no biggie. Let's just continue with this one. So right now, so this is the worker section. So you see everything is pre-mapped. So it just took everything in the pipeline and created the proper structure for each of them. And now I have my email, my worker information, everything is actually ready to be consumed by HDL at this point, right? And now the output of this one, so just if you're curious, this is my zipped file. So this is what HDL will require to be sent. So which is ultimately it takes, this will create this one will create a worker.dat for those that are familiar with HDL. It's, you know, you have your worker.dat and basically just zips it and send it. Then we have this second phase here, this other node that this is what it sends. So it sends the records to Fusion here, right? So, again, if you're familiar with HDL, this is a 3-step process typically that will, first you send your zipped file to UCM. UCM gives you back a document ID. Then you need to say, send a second transaction web service that says process my zip file. And then the third one, you need to poll it to say, basically until it says, yeah, I'm ready and you can download and the transaction has been finished. So we just do that into one little box, which is what we call the HCM data upload. So you just plug it in and then ultimately it'll do and it'll keep polling until it's ready. Now after that, it downloaded the my BI report, and then we decode it and then save the file and then invokes this sub workflow. So you see right now it's still working. It's working in the other one, but let's take a look. I saw that I received the email for the, let's take a quick look. Computer is a bit slow. All right, so this is the error. So if I take a look at the actual files that was received, if I look in there, this is 6 minutes ago, so that's the one. I download that file and open it. This is we're using the standard Oracle, you know, recommended BI, which is a report that Oracle gives that you can actually install in OBI on your Fusion instance. And when you invoke it with your transaction ID, this is what you get. So it's pretty nicely formatted. At least it can, you know, it gives you a summary of every record and all the information that you have, you know, for each, and it'll tell you which error. So like user key, and ultimately this says this value business is invalid for worker. But it's, you know, even though it's pretty neat, that it may make sense for an IT person, but it's not going to make sense for a recruiter. If you're trying to, you know, if you don't want IT to be responsible of getting those and then calling business to say, here's what, you know, here's what went wrong, you need to reformat that a little bit, which is what we're doing. Because so if I look at the actual email that we're sending in this case, so we're still sending, here's the transaction, if in case the recruiter gets lost and he wants to talk back to ID and say, here's my ID, transaction ID. But for them, we're pre-masticated the error and then saying, okay, for this one, you know, ultimately we send 2 records and here's the error that we got, which says this, and ultimately it's an invalid, on purpose, an invalid business unit that was wrong. So in a real production environment, typically if you pre-configure your Taleo properly, it shouldn't happen unless you get desynchronized on legal entities or there's an invalid one or something, which is still an actual use case. So we could be a little more specific and tell the recruiter, say ultimately your legal entity on the rec is invalid, fix it. All right. So how are we doing the email parsing? So if you see again in this one, what happens is we're calling this subflow. If we take a very quick look at the subflow, what it's doing, first thing, it's reading that zip file that I just showed you. It just takes that as an input, applies some filtering, and then loops through the record. And it just goes through, we just created a little lookup that says for this error, here's the output message for this, and we just apply a simple filtering. So it'll loop and then group the information by employee ID, because you could get more than one significant error per actually record. So we just group by and output. And then in the actual two-step process in here, then we send an email to the recruiter. If we look at it, we're just, in our email node, we can actually loop through records and say, here's what you're going to output as the final message, and that's just what it does. So we pre-masticate the information, send this, just group it, and then you get a nice email that actually somebody could take an action on. So that's it. And then the workflow continue. Let me zoom back in. The workflow will continue to do a second pass. So again, in this one, if I look at this configuration, this is another data transform, but basically I'm just applying an address data map. So same concept as the other two, but in this one, I'm just retaking my original payload, because it never gets lost, right? The original payload is still there, as I was showing you in the, well, no, I switched payload, so I just emptied it out, but we never lose it for the time of the transaction. So in this, I'm just retaking my results that I had or standard output and say, now apply a new different data map, which will be the address, to structure the address, and then we're doing another transaction with Fusion and it's the exact same mechanism. So zip it, create my worker address.file, send that, and then upload it to Fusion and so on. And then we're just doing some archiving. Say archive anything that is not needed, clean up all the files, and everything you only get what is needed. So, and so I know I'm going fast, time flies by, so apology by the way if I'm talking too fast. That's that might be the case, but don't just pile up the question as Pierre is saying, and we'll try to address everything at the end. So one last thing I do want to show you is kind of the power of those data maps that I'm showing you. So of course you go into config and you create all those data maps. The nice thing is if you want to switch, and it's an actual real use case, is what can happen is right now in the transaction that I just sent, I was using the person number, which means for an HDL lingo is I'm telling Fusion, here's the employee ID you're going to create. So you can say, create a record, but I'm going to tell you what the new record ID will be, which is, if you've configured Fusion for that, then that's how you need to do your transaction. And that can be the case if you're still in implementation and your implementation phase is going to run for a while. Maybe at this point in time for the first, a year, it might be 2 years, it could still be EBS or PeopleSoft as your source of truth for generating employee ID. So at that case, you can't have Fusion being the employee generator. So, and that might be a case where you say, okay, first we're going to go live with this. We're going to, you could get your employee ID from another system, or just say, okay, we'll just use the Taleo ID for a while, and then once we do the flip, we'll re-switch later. That's a real use case. But switching from one system to another is not easy. The data structure are quite different. So let me do a switch in this one. So I'm on the person, I had a person ID. Let me take the source system ID. I'll just do a switch, and then on this data transform, same thing here. So if I do a person number, I'm going to switch it to source system ID for the worker data. And the last piece is my address, which is, I'll say address source system ID, and so like that. All right, now everything is done. Let me just save this one. And if I just pause my transaction here again, let's pause it here again and rerun. Now I'm going to re-extract my data, but create a different data structure that matched this one. And while it's running, I can actually go to my config and say, okay, what is this data map structure for person ID? So if you look at this one, I'm saying person number and create this structure. If you work with source system ID, and what it means ultimately, it's just saying you generate me an employee number, but I'm going to tell you, keep track via the source system, which would be like Taleo, keep track of where it came from and the original. It's like your original or external system ID ultimately. And you're just saying, here's my source system and my external ID, but generate one. And you see the data structure is different for every single entity. So switching from one to the other quickly is not, if you have to do it within the code, it can become cumbersome. So if we look at this one and take a look at the pipeline on this one, you see that if I go back to my results, which is the section that I have, each of them are quite different in this case. So I'll look, so I have my system ID per Oracle and etc. So the structure is very different, but switching from one to another, ultimately you saw it's like a 30-second job. If you've pre-created those data map, you can switch from one to the other extremely easily. Now if I stop don't stop it and just let it run, it'll rerun the full thing and resend me basically another email with this one. So, and if we look at it, you'll see that it's ultimately the end user is transparent. It's going to be the same transaction, same information, and it's going to hit the same business rule, which is an invalid business ID in this case, which is not different, but in a different data structure that is being sent. So while it's run, let me run you the last piece. So if we look at this piece, so ultimately, again, one workflow, we have a sub workflow for HDL. The only other things, if you're wondering what is at the bottom, let me zoom in again. So the last piece is what we do is also a try catch in this case. So an exception, see this as try catch, that means, and it's another subflow ultimately, which is process exception handling, which is, it's not data related, it's more anything in the flow. So which we have another workflow to handle anything that happens. So what if your Taleo system is down, right? If Taleo is down, or if your Fusion is down, that you can send the information or anything that happens, it can happen, you want to catch them. And then so what we do is we create a different workflow. So for those one, you'll want different notification based on what happens, right? Do you want to notify somebody if Taleo's down or Fusion or what happens? So you may have kind of edge cases, and ultimately those messages will go to different recipients. So we just do that by a separate workflow as well, which is our workflow. So right now it should, Fusion is still digesting, so we'll send that second transaction and be able to, at this point, show you. And that's pretty much it. While this run, I'll just receive a second error message with the same output. What's interesting is just if we look at this, so now it's downloading the report, so I'll get it. If we look at the files, just my point is, so now this is my previous file that I just ran, and this is the latest one. So if you look at the Fusion response, let's compare one to the other. All right, so this one, you see this was the first one that I sent. It's using this person number, and then I still received a message that says, well, your business ID is invalid. But if you look at the second one, now I'm sending, work relationship information with my person ID, and so the report is different, but I get the same one. So ultimately, I was able to switch between the two fairly easily, just by switching data maps, and I just received an email. So if I look at it, it should be pretty much the same content that says, send to records and valid. So in this case, since this is demo, of course, I'm just using the same records. I'm forcing it, and that's what I put in my comment. I'm forcing TCC to keep getting the same records, because in production, of course, it would be using an actual concept of a last run date, say, give me your new records since the last time I run. But in this case, it's just we're forcing it to say recapture them basically and resend them just for demo purposes. So that kind of sums up what I wanted to cover. Pierre, anything I didn't cover that you think I should address before we open up for Q&A or?
Right, so we've covered alerting, data error, mapping, lookups, scheduling. So if you want to also cover maybe scheduling, and there's also documentation that you want to maybe touch on as well.
Sure. So schedule again is, you can schedule any of the workflow. This one is not scheduled, but you could schedule it. I can add a small scheduler and you can control the schedule. I think I showed the schedule, the name, but you just create it. We support pretty much any type. So this type is time-based, but we can do custom, which is you can put, your even custom code and just write, say, here's the one, or you can go frequency, right? To say, oh, I'd like this to run every hour. I want it to run every single hour at this specific time. So we support all the types, and then to schedule, and we also support, again, real time. So meaning if a system supports real time, we can consume integration triggered by email or REST services. So you can create a workflow that will be triggered in real time fashion by consuming an external message, so via REST or an email fashion. And the last piece is, and I show you those, so those are just the documentation. So you can document your code as you do it. So let me resume in a little bit, but the notes there are just notes. So if I want to add a note, let's say to this and say, oh, this is a worker.dat file. So I could say worker.dat file creation. And then that's it. You save it and you know. So the nice thing is your code gets auto-documented. You can add that, and we're working on another features. This is multi-line. You can put as many documentation as you want. And in our next version, we'll gotta flip switch to say, you know, flip off notes versus on. So if you want to have the more of a documented view versus a clean view, so we'll have that pretty soon as well. But that's the nice thing about this. So this is just documentation. We have 3 colors. You can say red, yellow, and black ultimately. And I think that's it. So we have 15 minutes left. So I would suggest that we open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, and I'll just take the control back. So thanks, Jeff. So I'm just going to go back here. So Anna, if you can make me presenter, please, that'd be great, if possible. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's good. Thank you. So we should see my screen again. Do you see my screen, Jeff? All right.
I do.
Okay, cool. So before going to the Q&A, first of all, thank you very much, Jeff. Wanted just to take a moment to summarize some of the recipes presented by Jeff with our integration platform. So the recipes that were presented are leveraged for all integrations between HCM and Taleo. So you now have, as you saw, end-to-end alerting when there is an integration issue. This also resolves the data error handling. It also resolves the maintenance of the CSV mapping files that are typically maintained by business data owners. And you now have control on scheduling and monitoring the integrations, plus online documentation that Jeff just showed 8 seconds ago. So we'll now take questions as much as we can today. And if there's any other unanswered questions, we'll answer them after the presentation with pleasure. So let's go to some questions. I'm looking at the chat window right now, and I'm going to go up and go for questions. So question here from Janine. So the question is, does the Connect Everywhere dashboard support API integration workflows? Jeff, please.
Can you repeat? Sorry, Pierre, I didn't hear
Sure.
the question properly.
Yeah, I'll say that again. Does the Connect Everywhere dashboard support API integration workflows?
If the question means, do we support, like if you get real-time transactions, will they show up in the dashboard? The answer is yes. If the question means, do we have an API on the dashboard itself to allow you to plug in or to plug your own widgets or things like that, the answer is not yet. So that's it's right now it's considered for future enhancement, I would say, is the state. I wasn't sure what it meant, but I hope that answers it.
Sure. And Janine, if it doesn't answer the question, please reach out to us with pleasure. You have our emails and phones on the screen. Next question is from Melody. We use out-of-the-box integration between Taleo TEE and HCM. Is your solution available as a supplemental integration?
Yes, it is. So we definitely do that a lot. So we can ultimately we have a pretty straightforward process ultimately to switch from one to the other, and we will go with you, see what can be salvaged out of the box. If some are working, some are not, we can leave some on and replace the ones that are not working ultimately. that's typical to do so. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so now a question for Julie. Do you ever use REST API to fetch the data from Taleo and then to input into Fusion HCM? No CSV files created.
Yes, we do. We can do it, definitely. So we do, I guess I don't know if it's not REST from Taleo itself. So Taleo is SOAP, but we can interrogate Taleo with SOAP and then not create files and do to HCM. Like within the data map section, as you saw, that's not an issue. We can definitely do XML, so work directly out of the SOAP. The reasons we tend not, like I showed, the CSV is more standard, and the reality is because there's the reason we perform this way is per recommendation from Oracle. Taleo Connect Client is the recommended tool to extract more than SOAP, and their synchronous SOAP API has restriction in the complexity of the queries that we can build. So they have limits such as a number of, like how deep you can go in the data model in one structure, and or how many filters you can put in. So there's a bunch of those restrictions that forces us to sometimes that TCC becomes the simpler and easier solution. So it becomes a simpler solution to use TCC. But if the integration that is to be built is very simple, straightforward, few fields, like anything that wouldn't require the use of TCC, that's definitely not, there's no showstopper, and we can do SOAP to directly SOAP to HDL.
Excellent. Question here from Burma. So can we get a copy of the presentation? I'll take that. So we, as Anna mentioned at the start of the presentation, this recorded session will be available on OHUG website. It'll also be available on our website as well, at the Cloud Connectors, and on our YouTube channel as well. So the information is, yes, it's going to be available. Next question I see from Asim. So it's a good question. It's a long question for sure. I see the transformation from one structure to another, but where in the business process would we implement if-then logic? And Asim goes on saying, let's say there's an inbound from HCM Cloud to external vendor. If a person has a specific national ID type, then create a specific record type in a flat file that will be sent to the vendor.
Superb question, indeed. So in where I've shown you the data transform nodes, you can simply apply a data map, but you can also, in that one, you can do a combination of applying your data map. You can do it in 2 steps, but ultimately you can say, first apply my data map, and then do another data function where you're gonna override that very simply, where we can, and what we call is the concept of a partial override. So you just write in the data function, you just say, I'm doing a partial override, and that's where you'll look whatever is your partial mapping. So basically, you'll use your data map as the generic mapper. So if it does 90% of the job, and then in the second phase, you'll just do, here's what's unique or particular about this one. So if you want to build a standard one, that's how you'll do it. So you could do your user-defined fields as a second pass, and it'll just complement the data structure that was done through the data map. Hope that was clear, but don't hesitate to reach out if you want more information.
Yep. Next question from Dan. Hi, are you using the HCM REST API, or are you using HDL for all data uploads?
We can do both. In this case, I demoed, it was the HDL, but REST as our platform definitely supports REST. So it's if there's an actual use case for real-time REST integration, we'll just build a REST connection to the Fusion server and basically send the JSON structure to it.
All right, question from Sridhar. Can you add custom scripting of any kind within the workflow?
Yes, In short, yes, we do native language as JavaScripts, so you can run and you can do. We have one of the box that I didn't show is called util function, and it's basically an open bar. You just write your JavaScript where you can manipulate your payload and do whatever you do in there and transform. So it's custom. Basically, it's custom manipulation of the payload. So yes.
All right, question from Tara. Does your Connect platform from HCM Cloud and Taleo support the outbound integrations from HCM to Taleo?
Yes, it does. So, and yeah, we've shown one way, but we definitely do the other way as well. So we can extract from Fusion and insert into Taleo. So we'll use to import. We'll typically use the same similar to what it is. See this as the other way around, but we'll extract and use Taleo Connect to import into the Taleo system. We do them all. There's no so in our standard, typically, like there's, you know, we support all. I think Pierre mentioned it, but every single interface can be run. So organization, location, lots, you know, the full end-to-end integration. We can replace every single one of the out of the box or anything else necessary.
All right, and I think we're going to take one last question, although there are quite a few other questions. One of them is, do you connect from Taleo into Oracle EBS from Caesar?
Can you repeat? I apologize, Pierre.
Sure, no worries. So a question from Caesar. The question is, do you connect from Taleo into Oracle EBS?
Yes, we can, definitely. So if you, EBS does have web service, so we can connect to it and do it. The more typical way we'll do, what we've seen more is, because most of the organization that runs EBS have they have already file import structure, and they're set up to do file exchange. So we'll do a file exchange, so we can do Taleo to EBS, and so we can support either way, web service or file exchange, basically. And by the way, with our tool, you come with an SFTP account that comes with it, so we can use our internal secure file transfer if you go file-based to transfer the files, or we support an external SFTP account as well. That's not an issue. So you just go into configuration. You can use your own or use an external one, and so we'll work. We can work on all use cases.
Okay, and Jeff will go for the last one, and I'll then turn it over to Anna. So last question from Andy. We have an in-house TCC that handles the data transfer from Taleo and Fusion. Is your solution to replace the in-house TCC? Yes.
So typically, if you know, that's the idea. And if you've done this, is if you're doing it with TCC, there's only ultimately you're doing all the logic and batch. You know, when you're extracting, you have multiple extract that you're run, and you have some post-processing step that will say now try to combine and do a zip of all those files, and then but the idea here is to replace it, yes, to with our tool to simplify things and have where you can have one extract, one file, and do so, or we can, you know, I guess we can complement if you're saying, oh, things works well with some and I'd like to keep some, so we can accommodate, of course, if you'd like to say it doesn't prevent. So if you're using on-prem with TCC, it doesn't mean that you could not use our tool to do some of the work, and nothing prevents it. So meaning you could still run on your side and we could run on top in the cloud. That's they don't ultimately conflict with each other.
All right. So thank you very much, Jeff. So this concludes our webinar for today. We'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar, and we invite you to connect with us. You have our emails here. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Twitter. We also invite you to connect to get a personalized demo, and we would like to hear you and with any questions that you have. So we are the Cloud Connectors, and we are your business partner. Have a spectacular day, and thank you all. And Anna, back to you, please.
Thank you, Pierre, and thank you, Jeff, and thanks to all our attendees for joining us today. A reminder that this webinar was recorded and will be posted and available to download on the OHUG website. Thank you, and everyone have a great day.